Right now, it's a complete apocalypse in Russia. There are no more tanks, the warehouses are empty, and rusty equipment stands dead and rotting. Putin's army is in utter chaos. Soldiers are being thrown into battle even with broken bones and deadly viruses. Veterans of the special military operation are spreading HIV and hepatitis throughout Russia. The epidemic is already on the verge of catastrophe. And that's not all. The Kremlin is planning to start a mad war against NATO. Who will be the first victim? What is Putin planning, and why could the world be on the brink of nuclear conflict? All this and more in our program Hotspot. Ukraine's victory is a real disaster for Russia's ranks. Russia has run out of tanks. Right now, the Ukrainian armed forces are doing the impossible. They are grinding down hundreds of pieces of equipment. This makes it impossible for the Russians to advance. Only rusty equipment remains in the warehouses, which is almost impossible to bring back to life. Now we'll tell you the truth about how the Russian army failed. Watch this.
In 2024, Russia managed to make up for its tank losses. However, going forward, the aggressor country will have a hard time with this, according to the Institute for the Study of War.
Where do the Russians get where does their equipment come from? Well, from production. Second, from restoring that Soviet equipment from storage bases, which has been on Russian territory for, well, all these 30 years. And third, restoring the equipment that was knocked out or damaged within the troops themselves.
The stockpiles of military equipment are not unlimited, and it's only logical that at some point they will run out. According to estimates by the National Institute for Strategic Studies in the United Kingdom, in 2024, Russia managed to make up for all its tank losses, and about 75% of its armored vehicle losses suffered in the war with Ukraine.
Putin has a strong and persistent desire to purchase and buy up military equipment from abroad. Yes, more often than not, they turn to African and Asian countries, where they had previously sold their T-72 tanks, as well as armored personnel carriers, APCs, and infantry fighting vehicles, IFVs, in order to now buy them back. Well, there is a bit of a trickle of this happening, but honestly, it's not very substantial or significant, mainly because in the global south, people are really paying close attention to and carefully watching the sanctions coming from the US and the European Union.
Experts note that Russia's ongoing efforts to increase the size of its armed forces and create new units only worsen the shortage of equipment.
Before the large-scale invasion began, the production of military equipment in Russia was already underway. Russians were actively developing and attempting to create some new types of tanks that were primarily based on older Soviet-era models. In addition to this, they were also working on modernizing the T-90 tank, updating its systems and capabilities to make it more effective on the modern battlefield. And then, of course, there was that, the much publicized and ambitious project known as the Armata, which was often presented as a symbol of Russia's next-generation armored vehicle technology. Now, it's not really about luxury anymore. Instead, they're primarily and mainly focused on carefully restoring and repairing old vintage Soviet equipment. Or they're producing new models again. But considering that the most important things, optics and control systems, which they used to buy from European manufacturers, they can no longer get those components anymore at this point in time. So they install whatever devices they have in storage from those same storage bases using old equipment from the 1960s and 1950s.
Such production of Russian equipment, of course, allows them to replenish their stock in terms of quantity, but not in terms of quality.
The equipment is being restored. It can shoot and it can move, but when it comes to its overall quality, it falls far below even the basic Soviet and Russian standards that are typically expected of such military equipment. Even when stored at designated storage bases, equipment that has remained there for such an extended period of time inevitably becomes unfit for proper operation, as the effects of long-term storage and lack of maintenance gradually take their toll. This applies not only to the instruments, not only to the barrels, the automation, the engines, but also to the tank hulls themselves. Few people know, unless they are directly involved with the design, maintenance, or operation of armored vehicles, that under the immense and constant weight of the tank itself, After a period of approximately 10 to 15 years of regular use and exposure to various operational conditions, the bottom of the tank begins to sag noticeably. This gradual deformation is a structural issue that manufacturers consider completely unacceptable, as it can compromise the integrity and safety of the vehicle.
According to analysts, there is a high probability that the tanks and armored vehicles from Soviet times remaining in Russian warehouses are in poor condition. This could make it more difficult for Russia to compensate for heavy equipment losses in 2025 and beyond.
A silent epidemic during the war. Veterans of Putin's special military operation are returning not only with injuries, but also with deadly viruses. Hepatitis and HIV are tearing Russia apart from within. Mass infection has swept the front lines, and now the disease is breaking into the cities. The authorities remain silent, but the epidemic is already beginning, and its scale is shocking. What this means for millions of Russians, you'll find out right now.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism, and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.
New gifts for loved ones from the Russian occupiers. If at the beginning of the full-scale invasion, Russian soldiers were sending home washing machines, clothes, and household appliances stolen from Ukrainian homes, now, when they return on leave or after being wounded, soldiers are bringing back hepatitis, HIV, and AIDS from the front in large numbers.
The absolute number of people diagnosed with HIV remains the highest in the European region of the World Health Organization and one of the highest in the world.
In Russia, this diagnosis effectively closes all doors for a person. HIV-positive people are not wanted for employment, they are denied mortgage loans and are essentially written off entirely. And while it's nearly impossible to find a decent job with an infectious diagnosis like hepatitis, you'll be drafted into the army with such an illness without any extra hassle.
And in addition, after they started offering such huge sums for signing a contract, some people with HIV have joined the military. They decided to hide their HIV status, and since the military recruitment offices have to meet certain quotas, they also turned a blind eye to it.
Shoigu is a well-known thief and fantasist. The reality is that infected people are being drafted into service almost without undergoing any medical examination. What kind of diagnostics can there be when they're recruiting people from prisons, where almost half of the inmates have HIV and hepatitis?
This has even become a kind of business in Russia. As soon as a person with hepatitis receives the one-time payment promised by the government for signing a contract, it turns out the soldier is sick and he is discharged into the reserves. But during those couple of months in training, someone with hepatitis, or worse, someone with HIV, manages to infect a large portion of their fellow soldiers.
I have a socially significant disease, hepatitis C. I've had it for 8 months now. That is, they keep shoving me into different battalions, assault units, fortification units, and constantly threaten to zero me out, throw me into pits and handcuff me. What is the command pushing us towards? Towards infecting the Russian army.
It's hard to disagree with what the hepatitis patient is saying. Not only does the Russian command turn a blind eye to sick recruits, but no one is in a hurry to acknowledge the problem within the ranks of the Russian army. As a result, it all turns into a real epidemic which none of the Russian generals are even trying to fight.
In fact, such an environment exists in any army at war, not just in the Russian army, but in the Ukrainian one as well. But the Russian army has its own peculiarities. What kind? Informational ones. Hepatitis cases are covered up because if you admit the fact that hepatitis has appeared, you'll have to carry out anti-epidemic measures. Can you imagine doing that on the front line or in the soldiers' rest area? Isolating them there. And you're also supposed to find out where the infection came from. And what does that mean? Reporting on drug addiction, on same-sex relationships. Oh, no way.
The most that hepatitis and AIDS patients in the Russian army can count on is a couple of weeks in a hospital bed at the nearest military hospital, where once again they end up infecting everyone they possibly can.
While I was in Moscow, I unfortunately contracted hepatitis, and also at that particular time developed osteomyelitis in my leg as well. Now I need help.
Hepatitis went into battle along with the troops. To be more precise, 5 hepatitis brigades.
Outwardly healthy soldiers returning home from the special military operation may be carrying a deadly threat inside. Unaware of their condition, such patients continue to spread the virus in civilian life, among their family, friends, and acquaintances with whom they come into contact.
War has always given rise to an intensified epidemics, from the Spanish flu to the plague, from African and Asian diseases, from mercenaries to tuberculosis. The special military operation has become a deadly cauldron of infections from all over the world.
On top of everything else, Russian doctors complain that after the start of the special military operation, the government has completely abandoned most programs for the prevention of hepatitis, HIV, and AIDS.
And since recently the budget has been heavily redirected toward military needs, of course, this could not help but affect the social sphere, the healthcare sector, and in particular when it comes to HIV infection, we are seeing the same kind of disorder and confusion.
In recent years, the Kremlin hasn't paid much attention to vaccinating its own citizens either.
Vaccination campaigns have largely been disrupted and there are no imported vaccines. There is only Russian-made vaccine material and it is not always of good quality.
As a result, the chances of contracting hepatitis or an even more exotic and deadly disease from SVO participants in Russia are increasing every day. Meanwhile, in order to save money for the war, the Kremlin has closed more than 100 medical institutions across Russia. According to Russian journalists, the rate of hospital closures has increased more than fivefold compared to previous years. It seems Putin doesn't need sick Russians, he only needs more and more soldiers.
Right now there is chaos in Putin's army. The Kremlin is sending even maimed soldiers to their deaths. They don't care about broken bones, concussions, or blood. As long as you can breathe, you are required to fight. The wounded are forcibly held back. They are not allowed to leave the front alive. The command sends even those barely able to stand into battle. The losses are colossal. Putin's army is worn out. Who will be the next in the Kremlin's meat grinder? You'll find out right now. The command of the armed forces of the Russian Federation treats its soldiers as expendable material.
A month and a half ago, 3 of us came back from the mission as 300s. They still can't get into the hospital. They walk on crutches with a cane. The hospital just throws out the seriously wounded. They say you're as healthy as an ox.
Despite various injuries, they are all being forcibly kept at the front.
Security service removes casts from our guys, takes away their crutches, and prepares them for combat missions. The guys are limping. They shove them into vehicles in wheelchairs. The security service has lost all fear.
All of this is happening because of a shortage of personnel and heavy losses in the Russian Federation's army.
2. Another 2. 1, 2. You can see this sticking out from under the snow. Fuck, what is it you just can't get used to? It's the smell. There they are, lying there. They're all ours. No enemies here.
If before, soldiers with diagnosed pneumonia or tachycardia were sent from military hospitals to the front, now more and more often you see soldiers on the front lines with crutches or walking sticks.
Here are the servicemen, all with sticks. Some are wounded in the arms, some in the legs. I'm deaf and I have a stick too.
The UK Ministry of Defence Intelligence reports that the command of the Russian armed forces is now forming new assault groups from wounded Russian soldiers.
This is how we film, so they don't see the phone. That's it, they're being sent off. That's it, they're being sent off. They're writing them down and the guys are going on the assault now. They'll go by evening, well, or in the morning. Now they'll be taken away, sent to Makivka. That's how it is. There are the guys. That's it, they've arrived.
The 20th Combined Arms Army is mentioned, which, according to British intelligence, may have formed assault groups from wounded soldiers.
The well-known and famous 20th Army.
That's it.
He had an epileptic seizure episode just now, right in front of us, right here. Damn it, right now.
There is a realistic possibility that Russian commanders are directing this activity to support personnel who would otherwise be lost in an overburdened medical system.
One of the soldiers in the video says that he signed a contract, went on combat missions 5 times, received 2 serious wounds, and suffered a brain injury.
Everything's fine. I served, yes. Went into battle 5 times, got 2 serious wounds and a severe brain injury. The psych ward classified me as B, unfit for weapons. Now they're giving me a weapon and taking me, driving me to the front line. They do this without any problems, just like that. That's what the 20th Army is like. I did the G30.
30 days of leave, now he's going to the front line.
I spent my first G15 at the front, too. Where the hell to? You want all of us to heal up? Well, here, I can give you a sneaker, damn it.
The occupiers are sending wounded and shell-shocked soldiers into attacks to maintain the intensity of their offensives despite slow advances and heavy losses.
The army is running out of steam. It's becoming much harder to advance in the same way as they did in the fall. That would require some truly incredible new sacrifices. A new recruitment drive, a massive contract enlistment or mobilization, and accordingly, more of these assaults, so that people keep dying.
The Russians are using their wounded comrades as expendable material. Torture, violence, threats, and executions.
If they hand me a weapon when I arrive there, but my hand is in this condition, injured and barely able to hold anything, what am I supposed to do? And then, as if that's not enough, they'll come across Bertsina, who's struggling to walk because her leg is in such bad shape, twisted and hurting with every step. It's hard to imagine how either of us could possibly manage in a situation like that. So should we go then? It's already a circus, a real circus. They just won't let you recover in peace, damn it. They shove you somewhere, transfer you from one place to another.
These shots were filmed by a drone. In them, you can see how the enemy uses occupiers on crutches to try to locate the firing positions of the defense forces. The updated report states that 840,000 Russian soldiers have already been wounded or killed. About 400,000 require treatment in medical facilities outside the combat zone.
Just yesterday, 50 people were lost. 50 people. Today, one wounded man in very serious condition was brought back, a 300th. Out of those 50 people, 49 were all 200s, and one was a 300th.
Out of 30 guys, only 2 wounded soldiers survived, and even they are in serious condition. These are confirmed facts and have caused a stir on the internet. In this area, there is a large number of so-called 200s and 300s losses.
And here are Storm V soldiers with serious injuries being sent back into battle again. They were deprived of the opportunity to recover.
They don't get any treatment at all. I mean, absolutely nothing. Well, they do treat them, but just bandage them up, and there's no proper evacuation for them, basically, no surgeries that they actually need.
The occupiers also complain about the lack of proper medical care in special facilities located farther from the front line.
Basically, this anthracite hospital, the place where we are now, is actually, in fact, much more like a prison facility than a real hospital. As I mentioned earlier, there are 10 people per floor, just one single toilet for everyone, absolutely constant lines everywhere, lines for bandaging, and they constantly prod and poke around without using any painkillers at all, ever, not even the slightest relief. The attitude is absolutely terrible.
All the medical burden falls back on the military units where they don't treat you, they cripple you. In Tuva, wounded soldiers who were to be sent back to the front were beaten and tortured with electric shock. Some people are luckier. They end up in elite areas of Russia, for example, near Rubliovka. But due to a shortage of beds in the hospitals, wounded occupiers have even started being placed in the gynecology ward.
Honestly, the world has gone mad these days, and it's absolutely terrifying what is happening in it right now, all around us, everywhere we look.
In 300 meters, turn right onto Minsk Highway.
Barmeli is lying in the gynecology ward. Everything is packed to capacity. Everything is extremely difficult.
By law, military personnel who have sustained combat injuries are entitled to several types of compensation. But for the Kremlin, this is not profitable. The authorities are doing everything they can to save money on payments to servicemen. In 2025, Putin plans to allocate almost a third of the federal budget to defense, which amounts to 13.5 trillion rubles. To replenish the ranks of the army, the Kremlin is increasing bonuses and social benefits for new recruits. But not everyone is aware of what awaits them when they try to earn easy blood money in the war against Ukraine.